Hello, today I'm looking at the Majjhima Nikaya number 62, which is entitled the Maharahulovada Sutta, which is translated as the Greater Discourse of Advice to Rahula. And the location is Savatthi, and the people mentioned are Buddha, the Venerable Rahula, who is Buddha's son, and it's believed that Buddha's son Rahula is is a teenager at the time of this sutta. And the other person involved is Sariputta, who is one of Buddha's close followers. So it starts off with Buddha and Rahula walking to Savatthi on alms round. The Buddha is leading with Rahula following close behind. Buddha glanced back to Rahula and said, "Any kind of material form, whether past, present or future, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all material form should be seen as it actually is, with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself." Rahula responds, "Really only material form, blessed one? Really only material form, sublime one?" Buddha replies, "Of course material form, Rahula, of course feeling, Rahula, of course perception, Rahula, of course formation, Rahula, of course consciousness, Rahula." Rahula considered thus, "Who would go into town today for alms when personally admonished by the Blessed One?" So Rahula turned back, sat down at the root of a tree, folded his legs crosswise, sat erect and established mindfulness. The Venerable Sariputta saw Rahula sitting and said to him, "Rahula, develop mindfulness of breathing. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and benefit." After meditating all day, Rahula went to Buddha and asked, "How is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and benefit?" Now, initially, Buddha doesn't directly answer the question, but picks up from the morning's interrupted conversation. So Buddha answers as follows: "Rahula, whatever internally belonging to oneself is solid, solidified, clung to, head hairs, body hairs, nails, skin, teeth, flesh, sinews, bones, stomach content, feces, lungs, intestines, all this is called the internal earth element. Now both the internal earth element and the external earth element are simply earth element. And that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is, with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the earth element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the earth element, and it fades from the mind." And what, Rahula, is the water element? It may be internal or external. Internally, it is water, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, tears, snot, urine, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself that is watery and clung to, is called the internal water element. Now, both the internal and external water element are simply water element, and that should be seen as it actually is, with proper wisdom as follows: "This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself." When one sees it thus, as it actually is, with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the water element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the water element, and it fades from the mind. And what, Rahula, is the fire element? The fire element may be either internal or external. The internal fire element is whatever belonging to oneself is fire, fiery and clung to, that by which one is warmed, ages and is consumed, and that by which what is eaten, drunk, consumed and tasted gets completely digested that is the internal fire element. Now both internal and external are simply fire element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the fire element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the fire element, and it fades from the mind. And what, Rahula, is the air element? It may be internal or external. Internally it belongs to oneself. It is air upgoing, downgoing, winds in the belly, winds in the bowel. What's that course through the limbs, in breath and out? Winds that course through the limbs, in breath and out breath. Now both the internal and external air element are simply air element, and that should be seen with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the air element, makes the mind dispassionate towards the air element, and it fades from the mind. And what, Rahula, is the space element? The space element may be internal or external. The internal space element is whatever internally belonging to oneself is spatial and is clung to. That is, the whole of the ears, the nostrils, the door of the mouth, the aperture whereby one eats, drinks, consumed and tastes, gets swallowed, or where it collects and whereby it is excreted, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is spatial and clung to. Now both internal and external space elements are simply space element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the space element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the space element, and it fades from the mind. So, Rahula, develop meditation that is like earth. For when you develop meditation like the earth, arising agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people throw clean and dirty things, excrement, urine, spittle, pus and blood on the earth, and the earth is not repelled, humiliated or disgusted because of that, so too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like the earth. Then arisen agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation that is like water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, arisen agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people wash clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, spittle, pus and blood in water, and the water is not repelled, humiliated, disgusted because of that, so too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, arisen agreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. So Buddha then continues to give the analogies to develop meditation like fire, where fire is not repelled, humiliated or disgusted by clean and dirty things. Like air, where air is not repelled when it blows on clean and dirty things. Like space, which is not established anywhere. So when you develop meditation, like earth, air, fire, water, space, you are not repelled and disgusted. Then arisen and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. So I think saying so distractions, good and bad, will occur during meditation, but let them pass and fade away without consequence. So it continues, Buddha speaking to Rahula. Rahula, develop meditation on loving kindness. For when you develop meditation on loving kindness, any ill will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on compassion. For when you develop meditation on compassion, any cruelty will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on altruistic joy. For when you develop meditation on altruistic joy, any discontent will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation based on equanimity. For when you develop meditation based on equanimity, any aversion will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on the unattractive. For when you develop meditation on the unattractiveness, passion will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on the perception of impermanence. For when you develop meditation on the perception of impermanence, the conceit I am will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on the mindfulness of breathing. For when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and benefit. Consider, Rahula, a monk has gone to the forest, sits at the root of a tree, folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, established mindfulness in front of him, ever mindful to the breath he breathes, ever mindful to the breath he breathes out. So breathing in long, he perceives, I breathe in long. Breathing out long, he perceives, I breathe out long. So this is going through the 16 steps on the mindfulness of breathing and how it can be of great fruit and benefit. So secondly, breathe in short, he perceives, I breathe in short. Breathing in short, breathing out short, he perceives, I breathe out short. Thirdly, he trains himself, this is the monk, he trains himself, I shall breathe in sensitive to the whole body, I shall breathe out sensitive to the whole body. Fourthly, I shall breathe in calming bodily fabrication, I shall breathe out calming bodily fabrication. 5, I shall breathe in sensitive to rapture, I shall breathe out sensitive to rapture. 6, I shall breathe in sensitive to pleasure, I shall breathe out sensitive to pleasure. 7, I shall breathe in sensitive to mental formations, I shall breathe out sensitive to mental formations. So I'm looking at here at I've taken this from the translations by Bhikkhus Bodhi and Thanissaro, and they tend to use slightly different emphasis on these words. So we're using sensitive, it could be experiencing, or it could be aware of. So it could be I shall breathe out sensitive to pleasure, or I shall breathe out experiencing pleasure, or I shall breathe out aware of pleasure. So there's that sort of subtle difference that can be picked up in the different translations. So carrying on, we've just done number 6, which is the sensitive to pleasure. 7, I shall breathe in sensitive to mental formations, or aware of mental formations. I shall breathe out sensitive to, or experiencing, or aware of mental formations. 8, I shall breathe in calming mental formations. I shall breathe out calming mental formations. I shall breathe in sensitive to the mind. I shall breathe out sensitive to the mind. 10, I shall breathe in gladdening the mind. I shall breathe out gladdening the mind. 11, I shall breathe in concentrating the mind. I shall breathe out concentrating the mind. 12, I shall breathe in releasing the mind. I shall breathe out releasing the mind. I shall breathe in contemplating impermanence. I shall breathe out contemplating impermanence. He trains himself, number 14, I shall breathe in contemplating fading away. I shall breathe out contemplating fading away. He trains himself, number 15, I shall breathe in contemplating cessation. I shall breathe out contemplating cessation. And 16, he trains himself thus, I shall breathe in contemplating relinquishment. I shall breathe out contemplating relinquishment. So just to go through those again, we're looking at contemplation on the body, bodily fabrication, rapture, pleasure, mental formation, the mind, and then impermanence, and then cessation. In conclusion, Buddha says, Rahula, this is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, so that it is of great fruit and benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, even the final in-breaths and out-breaths are known as they cease, not unknown. So a person remains conscious right to the end. Rahula was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. And so ends Majjhima Nikaya number 62. Thanks for watching.